You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Turning now to the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have Salt Lake Tribune columnist Michelle Quist and Crystal Young-Otterstrom with LDS Democrats. Ladies, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome.
It's great.
The first 2 weeks of the legislative session dominated by Medicaid expansion. Let's talk about that. SB 96 on a fast track through the legislature. Your latest column, you wrote about it. And one thing I thought that was interesting is this has brought a change of heart for you. Talk about that.
Well, you know, before I was like they're saying now, I was worried about the impact in the future on the future budget and, you know, and what that would mean. But it's clear Utah voted for it. You know, the initiative passed and the legislature should implement it. I mean, if it keeps putting its, you know, its hand up in the voters' faces, it's not a good look for us, especially for Republicans and the, you know, who control the legislature. It just doesn't look good. One
of the things you brought up in your column, though, is that before you thought initiative was a poor way of going about policy.
Well, and I still do. I do. I think initiatives aren't, you know, there's no accountability to it. There are always things that you know, whoever's writing the initiative, they're not thinking about. There's these unintended consequences.
The debate's not there.
Yeah, the debate, I would rather that the legislature pass, you know, the laws. But the Constitution gives the people of Utah the right to legislate, and this is the way they do it, and I think we need to honor that.
All right, Crystal, Democrats are vowing to the end to fight against this, but they're not making much headway, obviously low in numbers. Your thoughts on this bill that is going through the legislature?
Well, it's already galvanizing voters and future candidates. I mean, there are 12 House seats where the Republican won by less than 57%, but where Prop 3 passed the majority, and sometimes a huge majority. Take, for example, House District 45, Representative Elias, and it passed with 60% of his district. And so candidates are already lining up to say, we will represent the voice of the people, because the Utah legislature has decided to completely ignore the people and forget who put them in office by completely ignoring their will on this issue.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, though. Will voters really hold lawmakers accountable for this come the next election? Or will they forget about it by then?
In the past, they have not. In the past, they forget, and memories are short. But I think you know, the environment that we're in now. I mean, 3 initiatives passed. It was historical, and you know, they first went through after Prop 2, then they went after now Prop 3. Prop 4 might be next, and that people, it galvanizes, you know, voters, and they'll remember if it becomes too, you know, catastrophic here.
All right, a lot of Republican lawmakers make the argument this is full Medicaid expansion because 100 to 138 still goes to the exchange, and they'll argue that's better coverage. They say we're still going to move forward on April 1st. They say we are following the will of the people. Your thoughts?
We're still leaving some Utahns high and dry who would have been covered under Prop 3. We're still not taking care of the least among us. We're still not doing what is needed for Utahns who need access to the doctor. And most importantly, it's legislators messing with voters, messing with their constituents and their opinions, and they should welcome them as part of this process.
So when Republican lawmakers get up and they say our concern is the budget, it doesn't add up. One of the quotes I heard from Senator Lincoln on the Senate floor, or Lincoln Fillmore make that, on the Senate floor is, you know, voters passed this proposition, but the math doesn't add up.
Well, it does, and the legislature is in charge of the math. Like, they can work it out to make sure that it works. And, you know, Representative Ray has that bill that makes an inflation change so that it's actually drawing a surplus for the next 5 years.
You did the same thing I did, Ray Ward.
Yeah.
Let's make that clear.
Names.
Right, because there is a representative.
Ray.
That's right.
So that is an argument a lot of people are making. Look, both sides have their numbers. They're going to make them say what they're going to say. So do we just implement this and then see what happens down the road? I've heard that argument a lot.
I think they would be in a much better place electorally, and they would have better trust of Utahns if they did wait and see. I mean, there's already a fiscal note attached to the replacement bill, and they're having to figure out how that works, whereas the initiative would have paid for itself.
Okay, I want to get to another point that you brought up, how they've already implemented a proposal for Proposition 2. A poll by the Salt Lake Tribune and Hinckley Institute of Politics says 51% of people that were participating in the poll favor that replacement bill.
Yeah.
So in that case, it appears that the majority support what happened there.
Yeah, you know, sometimes initiatives, and especially in Prop 2, a lot of people voted for Prop 2 knowing that it would be tweaked. And then at the very end of the process, a lot of people voted for Prop 2 because they knew that if they didn't, perhaps, you know, the message, because they had already started, you know, this cooperation between parties involved. And so, you know, if they wanted to make sure that they didn't, you know, they're like, oh good, now there's going to be a cooperation, but I still want to vote yes for it, to know that, to let them know that we want
Hold
it.
the feet to the fire.
Yeah.
So you see a difference between maybe how people are looking at the modifications on Prop 2 versus Prop 3.
Yeah, among Democrats, though, it is very different. I mean, when I was canvassing for candidates who were excited about, you know, talking to voters who were excited about Prop 2, many of them first-time voters, they did vote for it despite what they saw as some of the loopholes. But for Democrats, they are pretty livid about the compromise, and that, again, energizes them and gets them inspired to run for office and to find great candidates to run, because they feel perpetually ignored, and that was a case where they again felt ignored. But I know a lot of my friends who worked on Prop 2, who helped to pass it, helped to write the initiative, felt okay with the compromise, because at the end of the day they got most of what they asked for, and that's all you can ask for in politics.
I mean, do other bills have 51%, you know, favorability, or do they have a lot higher favorability?
Right. You would probably assume most of them are a lot higher.
Right.
And most of them get bipartisan support as well. One last thing on this. A lot of people saying now, what's the point of a ballot initiative if this is what's going to happen? Is there a valid argument there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the question. That's my concern. You know, I want voters in Utah to know that the Republican Party values them and listens to them, and you know, and will do what they want, because they're the voters, and you know, we are the people, are the state. I think it is, you know, troubling going forward.
I suppose you could make the argument, we have medical marijuana in Utah. We're going to have Medicaid expansion. That probably wouldn't have happened given the ballot initiative.
Right, that's right. The Medicaid expansion at first, though, might cost a lot more, which is, you know, counterintuitive to what the Republicans stand for. So.
Okay, let's move on to the Salt Lake City mayoral race. A poll coming out again by the Salt Lake Tribune and Hinckley Institute of Politics. Challenger, former state senator Jim DeBackus, leading incumbent Mayor Jackie Biskupski by 12 points. Crystal, what do we make of that?
Doesn't look good for Mayor Biskupski. She does have a strong chance of getting through the primary, especially because all of her opponents right now are men. And I think there will be a number of voters who will support her just because she's a woman. And there certainly are still Salt Lake City voters who support Mayor Biskupski. But for an incumbent to be rating that low, it's not a good look.
Why is that? Why does it come in that low on the first poll?
I think she's absent from a lot of things. I don't think she's you know, I don't think voters see her. She has a few pet issues, and otherwise she's just kind of, you know, not around. And then there have been the negative things that, you know, happened the end of last session, where she was absent, when they were, you know, dealing with the city. You know, the city was compromising with them. Yeah, I don't think it looks good. Still
a big field of don't know, 43%. But it's not because they don't know the candidates at that point, you would assume, right? Especially, you know, DeBackus and Biskupski have the name recognition.
Right, but
so
there are more
can she make up ground there?
I think so. She needs to tell her story more. I mean, David Ibarra is already sending lots of mailers, hosting lots of events, telling his story as a foster child. Stan Penfold is out there campaigning. He hasn't sent as much as David Ibarra has. David Garbett is a new entry into the race. I'm sure there will be more. Really, in my opinion, what Mayor Biskupski needs to look out for is making sure another woman doesn't get in the race, because I think that's what would hurt her chances the most.
All right.
I hope to see a Republican woman get in the race.
Yeah, we haven't seen
switch things up.
Even Republicans jump in the race just yet.
Let's switch
They're
things up.
not going to win in Salt Lake City.
Let's switch things up.
All right. Appreciate your time. Good analysis. Thanks for being here. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. Stay with us.